This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Applied Botanics. Applied Botanics offers a great line of CBD oils, including a line for pets. Now, I've been using their products for the last 2 months. I really wanted to test it out before I started promoting it to listeners of this podcast, and I have to say, I experienced some great benefits. They have 5 different products, which include comfort, focus, recovery, tranquility, and vitality. The 3 that I utilized the most were comfort, focus, and tranquility. Comfort really provided me with stress and anxiety relief. I just started a new job 2 months ago, so between that and the fact that we're still living in a pandemic, comfort really slowed things down for me, and at the end of the day, kept that anxiety and stress at bay. Their focus line also helps me during podcasts. It helps me to really focus on what my guests are saying, which enables me to ask the important questions and really pull back the layers of who they are. And finally, and possibly my favorite that I felt great benefits from, is tranquility. I take it 30 minutes or so before bed, and it really helps deliver me into that deeper sleep faster than I would without it. I wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Now, oftentimes people are skeptical of CBD oil, especially when it comes to the price. But whether you're curious about CBD or have used CBD products before, you will find that Applied Botanics CBD is nearly half the cost of other brands. Their thoughts are that using CBD should not require a payment plan. On top of that, listeners of this podcast can get an additional 30% off their first purchase using the code word Popko Project at checkout. So head over to appliedbotanics.com where you can learn more about all their products. And if you decide to make a purchase, use code word Popko Project for 30% off. Applied Botanics. Live healthy and happy. My guest today has been performing music for many years and has built up quite a resume. I remember seeing him play at a local bar when he was just 16 or 17 years old, and I knew from that moment I saw him, even at that age, he'd have a very successful career. He's played in bands like Leroy Justice, Miz, Cabinet, and with Charles Rivera, and most recently with artists like Ryan Montbleu and Sister Sparrow and the Dirty Birds. We discussed the release of his 2 new albums, Controlled Burn and Discourse, both of which are available on all the streaming services. We also talk about life over the last year, Jordan versus LeBron, 90s Pearl Jam versus 2000s Pearl Jam, and more. Welcome to the show, Justin Mazer. Hanging out with Justin Mazer. Dude, what's going on?
Good to see you.
You too, man. I feel like I haven't seen you in probably a decade. I probably have in some form outside of the internet, but maybe not. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but we hung out in Philly. I think it was a decade ago. I think it was 2011. After seeing Ryan Adams.
Yes.
Yeah, we hung out with Matt Gabriel, and
that's right.
We went to that bar. I forget what bar it was called, but that bar was actually on Bar Rescue with John Taffer.
John Taffer. Yeah, he's a big fan amongst my household.
Yeah, I mean it's super fake, but I mean, what reality show isn't fake?
I'm pretty sure there's a John Taffer bar kit in my apartment. Actually, I'm positive there is. But anyways, yeah, that was some time ago, and I kind of forgot about that for a second. But man, didn't we speak like maybe 4 years ago on something?
Were you? Was I? I feel like I missed. I feel like you were on with Rich on his podcast.
Weren't you there?
I don't remember. I feel like maybe I wasn't.
Well,
maybe I was there in spirit.
We'll have to investigate later. But nonetheless, yeah. It's been a minute.
It's been too long. That's what it comes down to. It's been too long. But I'm happy you took the time out of your schedule tonight to speak with me, because you did something really cool recently. Out of nowhere, Justin Mazer drops not 1, but 2 records, which is crazy because so before we get started, I'm not surprised by any of the success that you had, and here's why. If you remember, I've been following you since you were probably 17 years old. Not in a creepy way, but I remember seeing you when you first started playing out. Maybe you're not first, but like it was very early on. And you were in a band called Dirty Water.
That's right.
With Mike Doherty.
Yes.
And I remember vividly, like some of the shows at Outsiders. You guys were kids, 17 years old. But I remember saying to myself, and not that I'm anybody who knows anything, but I felt like, none of the success that you or Mike have had surprises me at all, especially you. When I saw you play, when I saw, just the way you carry yourself, I just knew that, you were going to have a good career. And here you are.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled. I'm humbled by that.
I was the old man getting drunk at the bar while you were 17 playing tunes. So,
I feel like you go as far back as the beginning of me performing music in public at all, in any capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching you grow, man. It really has. I remember the one night at Outsiders, I forget who was in front of me. I don't remember. We were all jumping around. You guys were rocking out. We were having a great time. And this kid in front of me fell backwards and smashed I don't know if it was my bottle of beer or my glass into my mouth, split my lip open.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it wasn't like anything like I had to go to the hospital, but it was not the way I wanted to end the night because Mike's brother TJ was also there, and we had plans to party afterwards with a bunch of people, and I looked like a weirdo with a busted lip. So,
yeah, lots of stuff occurred at that bar. I remember, and I just remember I still despise the steps, the load-in steps.
Yes.
It was pain in the ass.
Yeah, there was no easy way up those steps.
That's right.
But it built character. It helped form what you are today. I'm sure you've done
at Outsiders.
I'm sure you've done much worse since then.
That's in like a top tier, I would say, but there are a couple that certainly stick out.
Okay. But yeah, you have this career. I think what, you're like 31 now?
Yes.
So we're talking like 14 years ago.
Yeah. Crazy.
And it feels longer than that. But when you say 14 years, it's it's a long time, but not really. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, so you released 2 records available on all the streaming services. So one's called Discourse and one's called Controlled Burn. And like I said, you did it out of nowhere. You just kind of like, oh, here it is. I think you sat down with Mike Lello and kind of did an interview with him, and that was really cool. And you just released this music, and typically you're the kind of guy that, you're a guitar player, a great guitar player, been in a lot of bands that come out of Northeastern Pennsylvania. But you've always been part of a band. So now it's your music. And what's also cool about it, what's different, is it's all instrumental. So tell us a little bit about, like I said, there's 2 records. Most people put out one, if any at all anymore. Typically it's just singles, but you dropped 2 records. Tell us a little bit about both of those and kind of where it all came from. And I'm kind of guessing that maybe some of it happened over the past year. We're in quarantine since March of 2020, and today it's April 22nd of 2021. So yeah. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, Controlled Burn came first in terms of the idea of making an album like that. And I've always played instrumental music as well as just regular, conventional songs. And I've played in instrumental bands over the years, like all different kinds of stuff, and I've always enjoyed that. And that combined with some of my musical interests, I've always been a fan of progressive rock and songs that have more experimental or more long form arrangements. So I've played in bands over the years where I've been able to incorporate all these things, but I never necessarily. I feel like both of these albums are an opportunity to kind of check back into some of these musical zones that I've been in over the years. But nonetheless, Controlled Burn dates back to around 2017 or 18, where I had 5 or 6 songs that I wanted to make into an EP. I was living in Burlington, Vermont at the time, and I relocated to Philadelphia in 2018. And it wasn't until I stumbled into a studio here in South Philly that for an impromptu recording session, and that I found what I thought was the right room that to record that music in. So I chipped away with that. I chipped away at that with just the engineer and I for about 9 months. I played most of the instruments and used a few different drummers. That was ready to be released in April of last year.
Okay.
And the reason that I had it poised for that release in that time period was I had a weekend of shows booked, and this is back when there was touring and stuff going on, or I guess right before. But I had this weekend of shows booked in April where I was going to do basically the same thing, do a surprise release, or have it release it around the weekend of these shows. But I had handpicked all the people I wanted to play, and it was specific to that we were going to play the album, and I have other songs, building a nice series of shows which is also something I've never really done before. So when the pandemic struck, and the shows got canceled, I basically bookshelved Controlled Burn and dealt with all the realities and uncertainty of like, what am I going to do? So that takes us to like April or May of last year, at which point I made a couple of small investments into home recording, as I believe many musicians probably did. And I originally studied audio engineering in college, and that was over a decade ago. But I haven't done any engineering since. So for basically a 3 or 4 month period, I was in a pretty regimented routine of teaching myself or reteaching myself how to do all of that stuff, and then also just seeing through some of these new ideas I've had, as well as the old ones, to the point where I was just working on everything at once. And around the fall of this year, I knew I was going to be closing in on finishing all the stuff I started to do, which is ultimately the 2 albums and other things to be released yet. So I wanted to possibly do something where throughout the first go around with recording Controlled Burn, to the idea of releasing either an album as a surprise or a couple at once. And I set out to do that last year, but there was just not enough time. I mean, it was hard. It was much harder to schedule recording prior, when other life things were happening and gigs and traveling, stuff like that. But I had this large batch of songs late last year, and I basically buckled down with an engineer and a musician from Boston, Mark Friedman, and him and I just mixed and mixed and produced. He mastered it, but we did a remote mixing winter basically for 3 months. We just chipped away at all this stuff and ended up condensing it a little bit. And basically, I was like, I just want to have this stuff, and whenever I feel like releasing it, I can. And because they're more long form conceptual albums, I didn't feel a need to release a single. In addition to that, there was no demand for me to release any music, and I also was off social media for a good portion of the pandemic. So I figured it would be a nice way to a nice pronounced way to re-enter the social media world.
And I assume from our discussion prior to us going live here, you're a huge fan of social media.
That's right.
I mean, I don't want to get away from the music, but why did you kind of take a break from social media, especially, last year?
Well, it's something that I've always tried to find good balance with, being a performer and needing to promote things. But also, I think it's pretty obvious, and I feel like there's a pretty substantial amount of data to support this, that it's really bad for your brain. And it basically pries on your weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and just if that, it's hard enough to maintain this self. It's like a second identity you have to maintain. And the fact that I felt like I needed to do it to promote music, which is pretty much impossible not to. There was never an opportunity to do that. So it got to a point, and there was also just so much increased ridiculousness because of all of the things that were happening. So it just seemed like the right time to do it. And within days, I forgot that social media even existed, and I just found myself to be so much happier, and just I had so much more time and concentration, and to the point where I wasn't even thinking about that, and I was just in my zone, just working on my stuff. And it really, when I came back on, I'm like, oh, perhaps I could find there's a better way or at least try to blaze some kind of trail, to be like, maybe there's a way where it doesn't all have to be on this platform that just seems more toxic than it is effective, at least for me.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool that you kind of, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of got some clarity almost by removing yourself from it, because I feel like I say it all the time. It's not a good place, and I'm definitely a victim of its its pull, so to speak.
Well, everybody is.
Yeah. It's
it's just something that, like, it's, and even I could extend this conversation to phones in general.
Yeah, I mean, you're rocking the iPhone 6. You said
6S.
6S. I'm sorry. I am very, very sorry.
That's all right.
I don't want to diminish your technology here, but you're going to. They won't even take
this for a trade-in. It's so old that they'd laugh at me.
They don't even want it. Like, no, you keep it. I'm surprised they haven't found a way to shut that phone off and then force you to buy a new one.
Oh, its days are limited. Certain things are just not working, and because it's now like that, the cutoff is you got to have like a 7 or like the SE or whatever. But I like to say I'm always 5 to 6 iPhones behind, proudly.
Good for you. I'm proud of you. That's a feat to be celebrated for sure.
I'll be going to Verizon soon.
Yeah. But no, I don't want to get off the music. Obviously, that's what we're here to talk about. But I also like to talk about normal everyday life. So,
of course.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I was working in media, just recently, I left the radio stations back in January. I kept saying that if it wasn't for working in that industry, I probably wouldn't have social media. Because it was a way for me to know what was going on, and what businesses were doing what, and who was doing who, and what bands were playing where. And even though I'm no longer there, I'm still kind of a victim of it because I'm doing this, right? So it's obviously a necessary evil. But now that I'm at Axelrad, I have far less time, especially during the day, to monkey around with social media, which is good. It's funny, every Sunday, my phone will tell me, how much screen time I've had, and it's gone down every week considerably. So that's good. That's a win.
Yeah, and it's just, finding a better balance with it, I think, is possible, and I think everyone has a different relationship with it. Where, for me, it's perhaps you strike me as somebody who probably has listened to a Joe Rogan podcast before.
Never once. I don't even know who that is. Not one. Okay. Who is Joe Rogan?
Well, he's a guy that does a lot of things, but he once said, and it's a great move, the post and ghost. Say what you got to say, if you got to do some light engaging, then you're out. Post
Yeah.
and ghost.
I like that. Post and ghost. Yes, I am a huge Joe Rogan fan. I have this way. There's a custom made lamp from Scott Nichols. There's the third eye.
Sorry, success isn't going to allow me to. I got it.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then right next to that is a Joe Rogan bust that my wife bought me for my birthday 3 or 4 years ago. Not her best. It was in my mind her best gift ever, but I used to like move it around the house and put it in places that she didn't really care for. But yeah, I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan. So yeah, obviously, I consume the internet.
Yeah, as we all do.
But it's also good because your music lives there now.
You can't. You can't live without the internet and all of that. I think, and even extending, social media to phone usage, you could also extend internet usage to just like better balance in life. Which I think, at least in the pandemic, that was something I was able to do. If you subtract one thing, then naturally and you make yourself open to doing healthier things for your mind and body, you naturally will settle into a more balanced, flow or routine to gain some perspective on looking at a screen, even if you're not in media, looking at a screen in an office desk for 8 hours is like really bad.
Shit. That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Well, right now.
Both of us.
For right now, yeah. We're just we're slammed, which is awesome. We just moved to a new building at Axelrad, and the business is good. But it's a lot of work in front of a computer, talking to clients and all that kind of stuff. But that's not why we're here to talk. I'm sorry for keeping.
I know.
Getting back to that.
That's all right.
But like I said, I haven't talked to you. Rick, I have not spoken to you at length since 2011, and even then,
yes,
I know we were at the show, and we caught up afterwards. But I feel like you were there, but we didn't talk that much. So
yeah, so it's natural. Naturally, we'll digress a little bit,
and that's okay because if people listen, great. If not, I keep saying this. Doing this is also a selfish thing for me. I get to hang out with you, and whatever. So, cheers to that.
Absolutely.
It's Thursday. Thursday's a new Friday. You're drinking water. I'm drinking beer. Haven't had a drink since Saturday. I'm minimizing my alcohol consumption. But yeah, Thursday's a new Friday, and here we go.
Yeah, man. Cheers. I'll take more. Another sip of water.
So before you said you kind of removed yourself from social media. When the pandemic first hit, did you, as a musician, take advantage of the platform to do live streams or do anything of that sort?
I did. Yes. I did about a half dozen live streams for the first month or so. And as much as I have just kind of bashed social media, I could also say that those streams felt really good to do, and at the heart of the uncertainty of everything, I was almost able to simulate the whole process of actually playing a gig, meaning I have a stream booked. I'm going to let people know I'm doing it. I'm going to prepare a set of music, and then I'm going to perform it. And then when it's over, I walk into the kitchen to grab a beer instead of the green room to grab a beer. And then I have the adrenaline and the feeling of I just played a show and there were people watching, and you were able to engage as well. And I really enjoyed them. And I also workshopped some pieces that eventually became songs on the Discourse album.
Oh, cool. So you kind of use that like a comedian would do an open mic or something like that.
Absolutely. Even just if I have a skeleton for a song and talking about instrumental music, I could kind of leave sections open to a designated section to explore or improvise, knowing that it's just me. I could find ways to bring it back to a familiar theme somehow.
And that kind of had to be kind of cool because, where if you tried doing that in front of an audience and you felt like, maybe you perform that song or whatever and didn't get the feedback you thought you would, because that's what we kind of hope as a musician when you're in front of a crowd, that people would clap or get excited about it. Like you didn't have to have that worry about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a unique feeling in that regard. But it gave me kind of more headroom to explore in terms of, I'm doing my thing regardless. And what's funny is, I mean, whether there was a stream or not, that is part of how I practice guitar, is just to kind of play freely. So and then to get more comfortable with doing that and just, maybe people will enjoy this if I just organized it a little bit more. And it was really nice. That was definitely one of the things that kind of kept me sane for those first few weeks.
Right. Yeah, it's a weird time, man. I mean, I don't know what you do. I mean, if you have prior to COVID, if you had like a full-time day job, or if you were a full-time working musician, but I mean, regardless of what that situation may be, I mean, you were definitely a musician who played a lot of shows, played with a lot of different bands. And I always get concerned about artists in general. Like, I mean, that's an outlet for them. Playing shows and playing music and having that feedback from an audience. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that's very rewarding. I mean, as much as you perform music for yourself, I'm sure, performing for people and seeing the pleasure that they get from music is also rewarding for you. So, what was life like for you, for the past year, so to speak, of not really having that?
Well, I basically, I don't know exactly how many years it is now, but I've been playing music full time exclusively for at least 5 years, maybe a little longer. And prior to that, it was a series of side jobs, odd jobs, working a couple of jobs and playing shows in between, that kind of thing. But so my whole life, from my late 20s until now, has been music and touring and playing and just, getting to the next show, getting to the next thing. So, it literally felt like somebody took my world and turned my house and turned it upside down. And I'm just like, my goals, my everything on my calendar is canceled. It was like it was pretty terrifying and anxiety inducing in the very beginning. However, I talk again about balance. In order to survive playing music, it's challenging physically and mentally, and it requires, at least for me, I had to spend a lot of time not being home to survive sometimes. Averaging 175 to 200 days a year, I think a couple of years on the road, which I love and enjoy, but over the course of several years, that could burn you out a little bit.
Sure.
Where and then being in my late 20s, I start to acquire other kind of like long-term adult type of goals. And I'm like, I can't really do that if I'm just out playing all these shows all the time. So I have all these other plans in terms of like albums, music I'd like to record, and just like other things that don't involve music, perhaps. But this past year has allowed me to catch up on these creative endeavors I've had for some time. I also have, you probably remember, I was a long distance runner competitively, track and field and cross country and whatnot, back in high school as well as college. For the first time in a decade, I got way back into it. I'm actually doing my first competitive road race this Saturday, which is why I'm drinking so much water. So I think I'm probably in the best shape of my adult life right now.
For you.
I'll let you know after Saturday, see if, depending on what my performance time would be. But aside from that, just really had to kind of find the thing about playing music is it's constantly just you trying to accomplish something and there being roadblocks or challenges or adversity to overcome. And musicians, more than so many other people, when these things happen, are able to adapt much quicker because that they're just used to that. It's an unconventional lifestyle. It's random and sometimes chaotic, and you don't have a whole lot of a schedule that you could. It's not like Monday through Friday I got to be in one place. It's not that at all. So I just got to like be in one place, and just catch up on some things and just actually get 8 hours of sleep and I just feel like there's probably many other musicians far more extreme than me that are also reap some benefits from the pandemic year in that way. But the last thing I would say on this would just be in terms of adapting, finding new ways to do music. And I feel like a lot of creative approaches have been taken in terms of the live streaming. And me personally, I've been kind of working on a few things or trying to work on a few things for TV and film. And like, I'm really into the idea of possibly doing more like scoring if I can, when I can.
That's cool.
Obviously writing instrumental music, could often go hand in hand with that kind of thing. And perhaps in this next chapter, there could be new opportunities that wouldn't have been presented to you otherwise, if not for the pandemic, with just, again, the musicians adapting and finding ways to do their thing.
No, absolutely. You're 100% right. And I think, people across the world, not just musicians, is detrimental as it was, I think, to a lot of people. You said it yourself, like it forced people to kind of take a break. Because I mean, as a society living in a digital age where everything you're accessible to everybody at any moment, we're just going and going and going and moving. And it really, I think, kind of forced people to kind of take a break, stop and look around and say, shit, like, there's more to life than, doing the rat race 9 to 5 or whatever it might be, or being on the road for 200 or 300 days a year or whatever it is. It really gave people the opportunity to reflect and spend time with family and things like that. So, I mean, obviously, the results of this pandemic, I would never wish upon anyone, because there's a lot of job losses. There's, a lot of mental health issues, and, the list goes on.
Absolutely.
But in the same breath, like it was good for some people, which is weird to say because people were dying but it really forced people to really take a look at, life in general.
Absolutely. And I think for as just terrible, some of the things that have happened in the last year, along with what you just mentioned, there's equally as much potential for there to be kind of a universal shift in mental health and how people communicate with each other. And maybe people will be able to just, even like over the next 50 years, if they do a research study to prove that at post-pandemic, people are like 5% nicer as a population. That's a positive as far as I can see.
Yeah, that could be a win. Yeah.
But hopefully more, obviously. And I think there's potential for there to be major shifts in all of that stuff. And obviously I hope for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely will be. I mean, we're all kind of forced to, I think, whether, we like to believe it or not. Like, it's going to be a different world. It's not going to go back to normal. It's not going to be normal ever.
No.
People are saying the new normal, which I hate. I hate that. I hate that phrase.
Absolutely, very annoying when people say that.
I hate that phrase. I hate the word pivot. What else have I learned to hate over the past year? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but yeah, it's interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see how things kind of play out, and it's gonna be interesting to see how the entertainment industry comes back and how long that takes. And I mean, there's cities like L.A. and New York who were decimated by this whole thing. It's a lot to think about, and people far smarter than me hopefully will help build those back up. But it's a wild ride.
I think it absolutely. Well, I think to your point, it's more. It's going to start the sense of community, and everyone kind of doing their part. Ultimately, will help things get back to the way they were, and starting with at the local level and working its way out. So everyone's important to the whole process.
Yeah. So to get back to the music, and I apologize for continuing to pull you away from it, because I really want to talk about what you have going on, because I think it's great. You had Controlled Burn that was kind of ready to go, but you didn't release it. And then in addition to that, you had Discourse that you also put out recently. So did you just get bored and said, well, we'll just, instead of one, we'll do two?
Well, I wanted to do three.
All right. Well, three. Put them all out.
I had full intentions of releasing three. But it just got to the point where to do them to the quality that I wanted, and knowing that I wanted to kind of put a soft deadline on getting at least two of them out by the spring. And I knew that I just wouldn't be able to get the third one done. But I tried to do three. I went for three, but I was actually just recording. I was at a studio today working on the next album that hopefully I'd like to get out within a few months. But I don't want to put any timeline on it, just because I just would like to get things done right quickly, but as best as they can be.
Yeah, don't say that on this podcast, because my 5 listeners will hold you to that.
Well, just in general, but also when I do say it, which it's not necessary for me to say it, because I've mentioned it to another couple of other folks as well. I just then puts the pressure on me to know that I've publicly said it.
Yeah.
So I have to get my ass in gear for my own sake.
I understand. But yeah, two. I mean, are they different from one another? Are they the same? Does one lead into the second? Like, how does that work?
I used different approaches conceptually they're both different in a number of ways, but Controlled Burn was more based around grooves. Like it was a very groove oriented album, and just like the guitar ideas I had were all kind of in the same realm, just kind of more like groove oriented instrumental rock type stuff, where as Discourse is a little bit more experimental, and it's a little bit more I guess it considered to be conceptual, where songs do go into each other, and it's a little bit more. I'd like to think of it as kind of a dream sequence that kind of starts at one location and takes you to somewhere, then it drops you back off, at the end. So the whole approach with recording and the way that I went about writing or coming up with the material was different. Where Discourse, as I mentioned, it was kind of, I had these kind of like ambient loops that I would improvise over and go back and record them and kind of pick out the things I like, and then slowly kind of arrange them over time. Whereas Controlled Burn was just more like songs, where Discourse, the forms of the songs are more experimental, and they're a little bit more. The song lengths are a little bit longer and shorter on Discourse, so there are differences in terms of like how I the musical ideas I approached it with, as well as obviously like, the emotional stuff, the inspiration behind all that at the different time periods that I wrote them.
I gotcha. And you always see, when there's a band. Now, I feel like you're part of many bands, but like when a band has like maybe the lead singer kind of goes off and does their solo effort, or even a guitar player may go off and do like a side project with vocals. You took the approach of doing albums, all instrumental by yourself. I have two questions to that. How is that different from being in a band? And do you like that? Do you like this part of the process better than being in a band? And maybe there's three questions. Is there ever a thought of adding your own vocals to your music?
Cool. All right. Let's start with question one. You'll have to repeat the first question though.
The question was, you kind of breaking up away from the band aspect and doing your own thing.
Yes.
And how you kind of feel about that part of it as opposed to being as part of a band.
Okay, sure. Yes. So it's two different zones for me entirely, and I equally love them both. Doing my own stuff is exciting because I haven't had really an opportunity to do it in this way before. But it's a whole other skill set that goes along with playing in a band, whether it's a collaborative band or whether it's I'm accompanying a singer-songwriter. And I love the role of accompanying singer-songwriters and the role that guitar plays in that. And some of my favorite guitar players from over the years are those who serve songwriters well. Mike Campbell is from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, I think is the best at that.
Sure.
So it's like completely different things for me that, the idea of doing my own stuff arose partially of it's just something I was chipping away at when I wasn't playing other shows to basically it's something I could build slowly over time at my own speed on my own terms, which is really nice and appealing.
Gotcha. And I mean, you answered the second question in that answer too, because I asked you if you liked one over the other, and you kind of said they're different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. And then the third question I had was, it's all instrumental. Have you thought about adding vocals to that? Them being your own?
No.
No?
I have not. And since I was, a teenager in terms of writing music, I don't write, like my creative mind doesn't, it doesn't do lyrics. I write instrumental music.
That's cool, man.
I don't really have control over that. That's kind of just like, not to say that I'm not, I don't want to limit myself to that, but I'm just saying thus far, that's just kind of where my creative interests have lied. However, I also would say that I've developed some ideas in terms of projects where I love to maybe write music and have write songs for a singer,
sure,
and then like that kind of thing, or like I could, hey, singer songwriter, here's a song you could write, you could sing over it, and it's your song. Something like that.
Well, I think it's important to know your strengths, right? Because there's a lot of times where guitar players or whatever it might be, like they try to do the solo effort, and they're excellent guitar players, but they try and write lyrics, and a lot of times they can be very juvenile and very simple, and that could be a dangerous room to step into, just because someone you can be respected as this great guitar player, and then you try and do this and you're singing about like I say very simple lyrics, whether it's like my girlfriend left me and I'm so sad, or whatever it might be. It kind of takes away from how talented they were as a a guitar player, because it kind of diminishes like that whole facade.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Facade,
And
probably the
just
wrong word, but whatever.
and I feel like if you establish yourself as a singer songwriter, you limit yourself to that. Where I want to make all kinds of instrumental albums in my life, and not be bound down by any particular genre or style or approach with how I would do it. I'd love to basically, I mean, I'd love to make a surf rock album and an acoustic album and whatever else I could conjure up over the course of my life. So I have ultimate freedom because I choose to approach it in this way. Whereas if you establish yourself as a guy with the cowboy hat on that plays like what you said, it's going to be really hard for them to come back and release an instrumental experiment album. Expect people to, what the hell is this?
Right. And people don't like change; they hate it.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, I get upset with people who, and I've probably fallen victim to this person before in my lifetime, where a band you love, they put out like 2 or 3 consistent albums, and you love every single one of them, and then they throw you a curveball and kind of like switch gears. Which it's unfair for me or any fan really to judge them for that, because they're artists. They deserve to be creative, and they deserve to take different turns and experiment. And who are we to tell them that they have to stay in one lane?
Absolutely. It's like, well, I feel like to follow a band that you really love is like following a sports team, and you have to look at it from a broader concept of like, your favorite sport team is going to have winning and losing seasons. That doesn't mean that they're a bad organization because they have a losing season. And you realize over the course of a 20 or 30-year career, bands are going to try different things, and maybe they try something and they realize it doesn't work, and they go back to their original sound. And it just, there's so many possibilities. And I feel like perhaps as society, I don't want to say society, but kind of, me being a musician, I'm a little bit more understanding of that, perhaps, where I feel like the general masses of people are not.
Right. You're right. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's, how dare they, try and tell you artists to stick to one thing. It's not fair.
Absolutely. And to that, I say I have a Pearl Jam tattoo, and I still haven't listened to their new album. We're like, and it's not to say that I know I'm not going to like it, but I know that it's an album by Pearl Jam in 2021, and I got to think about that before I go in, and I got to think about what that means, because they have a large catalog of music, and there's certain things that I like and I don't like. And this is a band that I actually get into it with a couple of friends here in Philly, including one of my housemates, which they're a couple of years older than me. They like the 90s stuff. I'm like, you have to consider the timing. I got into Pearl Jam in the early 2000s, and they're like, and they don't like the stuff in the early 2000s, but I'm like, you can't just knock it because you like them at this time. And we get into these long-winded debates. Like that reoccurring long-winded debates about it, where it's like, there's so many variables. It's the timing of when you get into a band, and it's the trajectory of how good or bad their albums are around that time. But again, if you really like a band, you have to treat it like a sports team.
All right. Well, so I'll throw another sports analogy at you in relation to the 2000s Pearl Jam to the 90s Pearl Jam. Jordan versus LeBron James. I don't know if you follow sports.
I love that. Not only the only sport I follow is basketball, and I'm really glad you asked me that.
Well, I could ask you who's better. But we can never really know for sure who's better, because they can never physically one-on-one play each other, which is unfortunate, because that would help put this whole thing to bed. I'm going to say what I feel.
Yeah, I go ahead.
I grew up watching Michael Jordan. My dad took me to a Bulls game when I was younger. I got to see him play, thankfully. And like I've seen Jordan play. I haven't physically seen LeBron play, but I've seen him on TV. But I feel like the NBA in general is much different now compared to then. I think back in the 90s and 80s, even like it was much more physical. And I think that was just, how do I say this? Like that was just kind of how things were back then. I mean, I don't want to say we're a softer society now than we were back then. I don't want to get into this weird thing, but it's just a different time. Like it's you really can't compare them.
The game is different. The game is different. The way the game is played. But I wouldn't necessarily. I would put LeBron in like he's not in my top 3 best players of all time. I put him in like the 5th best player of all time, 5th to 10th.
Who's won?
Jordan.
Okay, so you're much younger than me. Well, you're 31, 38. So yeah, I mean, like you're younger than me, much younger. But like, I just feel like Jordan has had this. And like, I mean, if you watch The Dance that's on Netflix, it was on ESPN when it first came out last year.
Watched it twice. Cried.
Yeah, I mean, same. Like, but he just had this thing about him where like and I just love it. I love the and that's kind of like my mentality with a lot of things, and it's almost there's not really a place for it per se in this world now, because like you don't want to have like these like competition is good and you want to kind of be friends with everybody, and whoever does what you do, we're all friends and shit like that. But like back then it's like if you were on the floor against him, you were his worst enemy, and he would do whatever it took to embarrass you or just to put you in the ground. Even after the game, I mean, they were friends outside the game, right? But like, even after that, they were still like, he's still like, if they were golfing or playing cards, he'd still want to fucking murder them. It's just like this mentality. It's like do or die. It's just, which is awesome.
That's the ultimate, to me, that it just embodies the ultimate, like athletic, competitive mindset. Yeah. And it's never been better exemplified than by Jordan. So I just feel like on that alone, he deserves to be the best ball player, considered to be the best ball player.
And it's weird too, because like LeBron, like obviously he's amazing. He's an amazing athlete. He can do things with his brand and his voice today that Jordan couldn't do, because of social media or whatever it might be. But I just don't feel like LeBron has that killer mentality.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm not a LeBron hater, but I respect his legacy, and like I said, he's one of the best of all time. I just put a few guys ahead of him. I mean, I got to be realistic. He's been playing for a million years. He's undoubtedly one of the best of all time, but I don't think he's anywhere on the same. It's like comparing Kenny Wayne Shepherd to Hendrix or something.
Right.
I'm sorry. That's not true. It'd be like comparing. I'm no. I'm,
all right. Yeah. I mean, that's too hard.
I could think about that one for a bit.
So Jordan's 1. Who's 2 and 3?
So 2, I got to go Bird.
I thought maybe you'd say that. I don't know why. I thought maybe you'd say that.
And 3, I got to go Kobe.
Okay. I thought maybe you go with Magic Johnson, but yeah, Kobe had the same thing Jordan had, and R.I.P. Kobe Bryant. Kobe had that like killer mentality. Not that he wanted to hurt anybody, but like you were there, you had a job to do, and like if you didn't do it, it was shameful.
Yeah, he was the only guy who really answered to the call of who's the next Michael Jordan. He came the closest by a bit, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know, man. I mean, I take that mentality with me to this day as far as competitiveness, or not even competitiveness, just wanting to be the best. Like, I mean, I want this podcast to be the best it can be, and like what kills me right now is like the audio aspect of it. Because you and I were doing this over Zoom, so the audio quality is not going to be phenomenal. Which, when you're talking about audio, you want it to be crisp and clear and all that kind of stuff. which kills me, right? But it also, doing it this way, enables me to talk to you, who's in Philadelphia, and who would not, if I had a studio, right? You wouldn't be, coming up to my studio to do this. So it's like a give and a take. And I think with this, the world we're living in now, people are kind of a little bit more forgiving in that they understand that, people are doing things remotely now. But I don't want to do things half-assed. And I feel like sometimes when I'm doing this podcast and if I listen back to it or whatever, because I critique what I do and what I say and how I say things, because I tend to mumble sometimes and stutter or whatever it might be. It's like, this audio sucks. I can't stand it. But not to get off track here, but that's like, I just take that from Michael Jordan and watching him just be, just a huge competitor.
Absolutely. And even, I take that, I take that away from him as well in terms of applying that to anything I do. Obviously I'd played sports and stuff, but even with music, it's like, if like a booking agent doesn't return my call or email, all right, I'll go practice for 5 hours and I'll join a more successful band than that booking agent could,
Yeah. What's up now? What's up now? This could have been you.
But there is a truth to that though. And if you were able to turn it, and the thing about Jordan, and he was able to turn that into healthy,
right?
Like he doesn't actually, you are their worst enemy in that moment, but if you could use it to your advantage, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you're smart about it.
And I'm surprised that you're a 2000s Pearl Jam fan. Again, I'm younger than you, so I was 90s Pearl Jam, and I still don't know how they got so many hits on one album with 10. I don't know how it's possible. Who does that?
Absolutely.
What band does that? It's crazy.
I'm actually probably good on 10. I've done 10 enough. I don't need to revisit it, I think, for a bit. But the thing is, I talked to the guys here about it. It's a timing thing where I was 6 years old when Versus came out, or 4 or 5 years old. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Go buy the CD? What is your, so so naturally, I would actually say that the Pearl Jam era for me is probably 94 to 2000, something like that.
That's fair. That's fair.
But again, if you're following it like a sports team, it's I'm checking out what they're doing. I see what they're doing. And especially now, having played music a little bit, I could kind of reflect on some of the musical things that they have chances and that they've taken, and the way that they've changed their, for example, there was a period in the 90s where they were backing Neil Young, and they did an album with Neil Young, Mirrorball, incredible album, one of my favorite albums of all time. And then if you listen to, I guess it'd be No Code, it's clearly a lot of those songs were just more stripped down, just guy with an electric guitar, Crazy Horse style stuff. Clearly that he learned something, he took something from that time period, and it's cool to see he's 35 years old, he's on tour with Neil, and the mentality behind the one layer removed, I guess, from just the songs, in terms of I tend to have an interest in how old the people were when they made it, what was going on in their life, what prompted this, or what inspired this kind of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you ever think about oh man, Eddie Vedder was 35 years old when he did XYZ, and you're almost at that age now. It's because I do that. It's
why do you think I released 2 albums?
No, but it's so weird to think, and I still I'll watch college football, rarely, but sometimes, and I feel like those kids are in their 30s like me, but they're 18. It's how is this even possible?
Oh, yeah.
How are they 18 years old on national TV doing the things they're doing? Or even NBA players who are 18, 19, 20. It's mind-blowing.
Absolutely. Well, the most spirit-crushing thing is that, something to think about for everybody, is that I believe it's the age 27. The Beatles did all of their music, did all of their tour, and released all their albums and broke up, and they were like 27 years old, I think. Maybe 26. Definitely not 28, though.
Biggest band in the world at 26, 27.
They're out.
It's just crazy to think about. It's like when I was 27, dude, when I was 27, I was probably at Outsiders watching you play.
Yeah. Well, you were. That
or whatever it was. I was 27.
20.
I was no, because 27 was 2000. Oh, I was with my wife at the time, so I was watching you play at Outsiders way before then, like 2006 or 2007. Whatever, not important. But yeah, I mean, I think about what I was doing at 27. It was not creating the music the Beatles did.
I mean,
or
in
changing
general,
the world.
In regards to playing music, it's I never really expect. I've gone along this journey not expecting anything, and sometimes I've thought that it's like the end of the road at times, and there's been crossroads and decisions I've had to make and risks I've had to take to continue. But I've just kind of continue with the idea of like music doesn't really owe me anything,
right?
And the fact that I've been able to do it solely as for a living and be able to tour to the extent that I have and play with some of the people that I have, I basically could like retire now, and like I'm like, oh, I got like an incredible opportunity, and I was able to do my like live out aspects of my goals of playing music for a living. But now it's like again back to Jordan, it's like, well, I'm here, I got to be here, and if I'm here, why would I stop here? And naturally I'm not going to stop playing music, but
right.
I'm very thankful, and I've always had minimal expectations because of how just challenging the musical pursuit can be at times.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's a lot of people who play in bands, they'll play cover bands, they'll have a lot of fun, and then what happens is they realize, hey, you know what, this isn't really going anywhere, this isn't where I thought it was going to be. I'm not where I want to be at the age I had expected it to be. Now I have girlfriend, wife, kid, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying for you to necessarily speak to it about where you are with your life, but like I know a lot of musicians, and it's like one day they're playing in a band, and the next day they gave it up. It's I don't know really what I'm asking with this question, but like I feel like people continue on the path and they keep pushing through, and like they're not playing arenas or anywhere, but they're still plugging away.
Sure. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you for rescuing me.
Absolutely. Of course. It's a very kind of how could I put this? That you have to be reasonable when you ask yourself, what does it mean to do this for a living? To some people, that means that they go play arenas. For some people, that means they go play bars. For some people, that means that they they teach.
Right.
For some people, that means all three of those things. And there's literally infinite ways to generate money by playing music. And for me, I've learned over the years that it's you could always explore other ways to do this. But there's going to be high and low points in terms of how busy you are, and there's going to be different kinds of things you do. I could go play a big show and come back and play a small show, and then go play a private party, and then go teach some lessons, and then do a recording session and play like a nice seated place, and then play a standing room thing, and then just you kind of have, at least for me, I feel like you need to be the opposite of delusional when it comes to being realistic, and like you're going to have good things thrown your way, but perhaps again coming back to balance, it's like, well, if I could get my bills paid, and if I could kind of budget my life to be able to do this and afford to do this, and if the work is coming in that I can do it, part of it I have absolutely no control over, but the other part that I worrying about things that you actually can control and putting yourself in positions to yield work or yield some kind of success, or to kind of forge relationships with people that you want to continue to work with, that perhaps you see a future of working with, and knowing that, like, I've gone from making 3 to 6 month goals to like 3 to 5 year goals now.
Right.
Because that's how long quality things take.
Yeah. So I guess what you could say too is, like, it's not having this, record contract or bust. It's kind of, utilizing, your love for music to, what you said, whether it's, teaching music, or, playing small venues, or just whatever, like, makes you happy and what you get joy from. And that's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And if you're just honest about that and realistic about that, it's like, I just really like to play guitar, and I like to see where that goes, and as part of it, I don't have control over, and I just kind of want to be able to make music with people that I like, and people that I enjoy playing with. And if I could yield income and survive off of that, that's a bonus as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about who you play with, and there may be more that I'm missing, but I mean, we talked about I think maybe your first band was Dirty Water. If you want to even like put that on your radar, but
Sure.
Leroy Justice, Miz, Cabinet, huge band, Charles Rivera. I'm not sure if you were part of others that I just don't know about, but that's cool. I mean, that's good company to be among.
I've had a few touring gigs, over the years. Most recently with a gentleman, a singer songwriter from New England, Ryan Montbleu.
Oh, no shit.
That I've been working with him for the last 3 years or so, and that's kind of been my main. That's been my main thing up until prior to the pandemic, in terms of like what occupies, the most time, I guess.
Dude, I don't want to cut you off, but like I was introduced to him, I think 2006 maybe. I saw him at the Jazz Cafe right here in NEPA. Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I knew that. That's great.
Oh, well, I'm glad I could let you know. I linked up. I mean, there was a period where I was living and playing music in Burlington, Vermont for 4 years, where I was kind of that's where I linked up with Ryan. But aside from that, the last 5 years have really been just like trying to get a couple of my own projects off the ground, and getting occasional calls to do kind of fill in gigs, or like or like a short term stints with groups. One that I've done a little bit here in the last few years is Sister Sparrow and the Dirty Birds. I've done some shows with them here and there. There's a great singer songwriter from Portland, Oregon, Brad Parsons, who I've been working with a bit. I've recorded on a few of his albums, and I do some shows and tours with him as well. And I guess those have been the main ones, for the last 3 years or so. But there's always smaller projects, and there's all kinds of configurations of people that I do different kinds of things with, and part of that, again, I mentioned earlier, has to do with just like the uncertainty and just randomness of my schedule. But what I get in return is I get to do a lot of different things with so many great people in all these different music communities.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Yeah, like I said, you put together quite a resume, and I like I said, I had no doubt, from the very beginning. The first time I saw you play, it was going to be that way for you. So,
well, I appreciate the support over the years, and it's great that it's awesome to see here we are 14 years later, still doing our thing.
Yeah. Yeah, one I was always worried about leaving the media was because I was at the Weekender when I first met you. I was in radio, and my biggest concern of leaving media was that I'd be I guess I'll say it. I was worried about that I'd be forgotten about, or whatever the word you want to use might be. But I started this before I left radio. Was hoping that I could just use it as a platform to stay connected to musicians or local business owners or whatever it might be. So yeah, I hope this can continue to be that. And again, I thank you for taking the time to talk to me about your life and your music and the past year that's been a struggle for everyone and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think we covered some great ground. It was great to catch up with you, and I hope we could connect more in the future as with these public outings.
Yeah. Well, one thing too, before you leave, I feel like I saw you playing guitar on a rooftop in Philly with Pat Finnerty at some point over the past year.
He's my housemate. I
was going to say, were my eyes deceiving me, or was that true?
No, that's true. If I actually if I do this and then tap the ceiling, you probably hear me talking. I won't do that. But yeah, that was a really fun, random, impromptu, last minute thing that kind of came together. We're in a position here. I live with two other musicians, and we live next door to a musician as well. And we have a couple guys that were kind of into this idea, and we have two roofs, so we get the two houses. And it kind of came together in a matter of a couple of hours. And we told a few people, and that first time we did it, I think that thing went semi-viral.
Yeah, it did.
Like a few 100,000 views or something like that. But we did a couple more. We did like two more, and Pat calls it the Corona Dome.
Okay.
Which is the idea of the two houses, socially distant, right, with the drums down below. But by the third gig, we had it all. We were running monitors up to running cables up into the second roof. I mean, the whole setup is couldn't be more perfect. We put the amps by the windows inside, and just open up the windows.
Right.
So,
Dave Grohl was there.
Dave Grohl was there.
Yeah,
he sure was. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's great here in Philly. Throughout the pandemic, there's been opportunities for kind of spontaneous things like that to happen just by proxy, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it was great for people in the city that, were still there. It was great for people online to see you guys play. I mean, Pat is one of the funniest people I've ever met. I remember seeing him and AJ Jump perform at West Side Cafe in Luzerne. This is back in 2000, probably 2011, 2012 maybe. But yeah, he's a fucking riot. I mean, I love what he's doing with his show, and he got fucking Grohl, he got Dave Grohl. Now he's doing those little series, Why This Song Stinks, which is hilarious. Yeah. I mean,
well, he's going after, and again, I mean, I've helped them. I've lent a hand here and there with the show, and we could collaborate and whatnot. But the what makes a song stink? I'm telling them, you're doing the Lord's work, because we're here. Everyone's home. Everyone's watching YouTube, and all of a sudden there's these guys, top 30 best bass intros of the 90s, and all this gear, 7 compressor pedals that you should own. And all these ridiculous things of these men, these ridiculous men talking about this stuff, and these guys have millions of followers, and we're like, these guys are morons, Pat. And we're like, somebody's got to go after these guys. And why are these 9 guys popping up in my feed all the time, telling me about guitar shit that I already know, and we just, and he is taking it one step farther, and he started this thing, and I mean, there needs to be more of that, and he's I'm proud that someone taking a stand against these YouTube guys. They're no good, man.
Not that I don't appreciate our last hour of conversation, because I honestly do, but that right there may have been the most fun I had during this whole discussion, was just you guys saying, you know what, this will not stand.
No, action has been taken.
Shots have been fired.
That's right. Because somebody has to.
Well, you know what? I'm happy it's you guys. I'm happy to be able to say that I know them. I'm friends of theirs, and keep doing what you're doing. We need people like you out there exposing the truth.
And
I hope
that's what I do.
I hope that anyone listening or watching this right now has listened this far, because this is the most important thing we've discussed tonight.
I expose the truth. That's what I do.
Well, dude, Justin Mazer, your music is available on the streaming services. We have Controlled Burn and the second one called Discourse. Congratulations on both of those. Fantastic music.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you have up your sleeve next. And hopefully, I keep saying this is like almost like my send off. I say, hopefully, I will see you sooner than later.
That's a great send off, and I send it the same back to you.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.